Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted once again and honored that you're here to engage this amazing information that comes out of the first century Aramaic language in the mouth of the man they called Jesus, though his name was not Jesus, it was actually Yeshua. Hail Zeus. Jesus was a great way to introduce Roman, Greek folks who didn't have a lot of use for rabbis to the Western world. So Jesus, Hail Zeus, everybody knew Zeus, and so he became pretty acceptable and moved right in there. Anyway, when you go back to his actual language, you find that virtually everything, every key refinement, not the whole body of the scriptures, but basically every key refinement in that came out of his mouth as he was addressing the errors of his day, the errors of Judaism. When you get back to the Aramaic, you find that virtually every refinement has been turned exactly backwards and totally misinterpreted. And so we're working to restore. Actually, we have a 4-hour video that we did. Dale Hoffman, Aramaic scholar, and myself did back a couple of years ago. I had coined a term called Aramaicisms, and Aramaicisms is a word that I created to represent our efforts to restore the first century meanings of Yeshua's words so that we could actually think the thoughts as he thought them. You know, you remember he says, if you want to use my work, you got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. I think we can fairly safely assume that most everybody in his audience had what we call physical eyes and ears. It wasn't what he was talking about when he said you had to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. He was saying you've got to have the brain cells. If you don't have the brain cells that he has, you can't think what he thought. You can't hear what he said because your listening will come from the brain cells you have for an idea. And I haven't given this example for a while, but seeing as how we're kind of introducing the Aramaic once again, you know, imagine that you are the best translator of Russian into English and English into Russian in the world. And you're coming to an intensive that Jeannie and I have got going on here in Bristol. And you live here in Bristol, and I know you've got an extra room in your house. And so this fellow from Russia contacts me via email and says, hey, I'd love to come to that intensive. Do you have anybody that can translate for me? And when I ask you, you, of course, are delighted. And, you know, through the week of the intensive, we get to have dinner with this guy a couple of times. We have lunch. We really get to kind of know each other and really enjoy each other's interaction and company. So at the end of the week, when you're getting ready to take him back to the airport, since I speak no Russian, and I want him to know my heartfelt, you know, thoughts about him, I ask you if you will explain to him that I think he's really cool. And you turn to him in your best Russian, and you say, Michael thinks you've got a low body temperature. Well, you translated my words absolutely perfectly. That is a correct translation. But since you didn't have my brain cells for the idiom cool, like he's a neat guy, I like him, would like to interact again, all of the brain cells that go with it, since you didn't have those brain cells, you could not hear my words. Remember, Yeshua says, there's so many things I want to say to you, but you can't hear them. Now, obviously, he could have opened his mouth and he could have blabbered the words, but the ears weren't there to hear it. Brain cells, yes, people's the you know, skin in the inside of the eardrum would have vibrated, and this sound would have gone through, but what people heard would be the content of their own brain cells. As this man did, you've got a low body temperature, where I meant from the brain cells that I hold. So this is what Yeshua was saying. You're really cool. I have a whole wonderful set of brain cells that goes along with that words that I'm using to describe you. I'm not saying anything about your body temperature. And so the Greeks, and this is one of the issues that we're going to cover in today's session on the Book of Thomas. The Greeks came from a very highly developed intellectual culture, what the scriptures would call the mind of man, very, very highly developed. And you'll see as we talk about Yeshua's input in this regard, we could almost take the statement of east and west is west and never the twain shall meet. Carbon-based memory is carbon-based memory, east, and is a whole different set of brain cells, a whole different operation, and never will the two coagulate. Never will the two be able to interact together from a place where, unless they are linked to their proper power supply, they're going to function. So we're here to support you in building the brain cells. We've been working on this project for the last 14 years. We're just about ready. A couple months, we'll be into our 15th year of doing this radio show, 5 days a week, an hour to 2 hours a day. Last 5 years or so have been 2 hours a day. Thank you, Dr. Tim. And the whole objective is to build the brain cells so that when you hear Yeshua or anyone speak a particular set of words, you have the option to hear, you've got a low body temperature, those brain cells are there, and you would know the context of my speaking when I said, you're really cool. You would know that I wasn't telling me a low body temperature, although you have those brain cells. You, knowing the English idiom for the word cool, you'd know that I was speaking about my warmth toward him. And if you can't distinguish that, then you can't hear the voice of Yeshua. So we're here to build the brain cells. And when we talk about building brain cells, we're not talking about building new physical structure. All the structure's there. What we're talking about is the fact that every cell in your so-called body is a storage device for information. Every frequency, every energy that comes to it is stored holographically in every cell of that structure, including, if you're a male, the sperm, if you're a female, the egg. And were you to conceive a child tomorrow, that child would have in its structure every thought you've ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, every reality you've ever engaged in, every unresolved issue in your life is passed to your children. That's why one of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines about kids is, having a child is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound. Everything you've never dealt with is in them, and because of the resonance, it's going to be strengthened in them, and they're going to tend to play it out. And they do not have a stop button, which perhaps you do. So you pretend that that's not there, and you don't play it out. And when they start playing it out, the whole invention of punishment is to stop the child or this other person from resonating in you what you don't want to deal with. Yeshua would say, in that situation where one points some form of violence toward an innocent being that never deserves such a thing, he would say, you must forgive from your heart, your unconscious, that which you just put into your brain's image of your child and you think they're responsible for. Come out of the blame game. Of course, the same thing happens in the arena of relationships. When you intercourse with someone, you exchange genetics with them. Now, just like your child, your partner has access to everything in your genes that you perhaps are in denial of and don't have access yourself. That's why Yeshua said you've got to forgive from your heart, from your unconscious. That word heart in the ancient Aramaic would be properly translated as the unconscious. It isn't a bleeding heart statement, so you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother, or forgive from your heart. No. He's saying you've got to go inside yourself, and whatever you've used to build your brain's image of your other, your brain's perception of your brother, you've got to remove it from your mind. Forgiveness is removal. It's got nothing to do with letting others off the hook. And most of us have been brainwashed into, by about the age of 4, being very devout, committed, religious members of the one world universal religion of blame. If you walk away from a conflict and in your mind you're talking to yourself about them, you are a member of that church. You may call yourself an atheist, but you are a devout member of the one world universal religion of blame. And if you are, then everything you've never dealt with is going to literally be projected into your brain's image of others. To forgive from your heart is to collapse those images, a technology Yeshua developed 2,000 years ago, and that we're committed to making universally available. You must remove from your unconscious, the hidden parts of your own mind, the things you don't even know are there, that you use to build your brain's image of your brother. And the same in relationship. Once your partner has access to your unconscious, for most people, it won't be very long before they're talking about how the honeymoon is over. Because the partner who has received your genes now has access to the hidden parts of your own mind. Those energetic patterns are now stored in them, and the interaction or the resonance between the two of you guarantees that that issue will come up within the relationship. The very same relationship that will blast you over and over and over again, or should I say, bring to you opportunities to resonate those things with which you blast yourself over and over again, those opportunities will run rampant. And if you put those energetic patterns that your partner has resonated in you so that you feel pain, trauma, hatred, vengeance, rage, guilt, grief, or whatever, if you put those into your brain's image of your brother, Yeshua would say you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your partner. From your unconscious, that which you put into your brain's image of your brother, your sister, your wife, your husband, your friend, your enemy. If you're going to graduate from the one world universal religion of blame, then you will be required to utilize the tool of forgiveness, the tool of the removal of those energetic patterns. There's just no other way to do it. And the Greeks, of course, not having the eyes to see or the ears to hear, put you've got a low body temperature translation on the words you must forgive. So forgiveness became, of course, I'm an innocent victim, you are the person who's attacking me, and I will be big about it, and I will let you off the hook for the pain and trauma that's moving inside of me. And they called that forgiveness. And it's silly when you got the brain cells to understand what actual forgiveness is. It's silly to have that conversation. Never, ever forgive anybody for anything. And many people say, well, oh, that's right, I have to forgive myself. No, never forgive yourself for anything, because you can't. You can pardon. Yeah, somebody does something off the wall, you can let them off the hook for it. Nice thing to do. But if you call that forgiveness, then you'll never engage in the actual process of forgiveness. And because you never engage in the actual process of forgiveness, the depth of depravity and insanity will grow and grow and grow. When you understand forgiveness, you may choose to pardon someone, and then you apply the tool of forgiveness, which collapses the perceptual constructs of your mind, the data that comes from carbon-based memory, from the memory bank, the data that comes from the generations. It will collapse the constructs that come from those generational patterns, and you now will have access directly to your own unconscious mind, and you'll be able to clean it out of all hostility and fear. And when you complete that process, you will stand in any environment with anything happening, and hostility or fear will not be a part of your experience. Perhaps yesterday you said terrified you, you'll stand at it and you'll smile, and you'll stay connected to love. You may not like it. It may be horrific, but it will not cause anything to move in you unless that something is in you. If you don't like it when something moves in you, the only way to resolve that, is to remove it and forgive it. And so, while I say never forgive anyone for anything, please, please learn to forgive continuously. Learn the technology, apply the technology and the tool of forgiveness to remove every bit of generational rage, hatred, vengeance, grief, trauma, or trauma. And that's what we're here to support. And so the Greeks brought one mind to the teachings. Yeshua provided a totally different mind. Everything that they said in terms of the most important refinements is a fraud, is false. Virtually everything. I think that's probably one of the reasons why in the name of this man, Yeshua, there are some, I recently heard that the number had been upgraded. Back several years ago, there was a counting done, and there were about 32,000 sects of so-called Christianity. I recently heard someone quote, 37,000 is the number now. Why? Because everybody's got a different set of brain cells. The objective of this work is not to have you believe anything, not to have you believe what Yeshua believed or taught, because he only used words, and words are symbols of symbols. You can't hear the truth in words. You can't speak the truth in words. But words can give you instructions for how to bring yourself to a healed state. That would be the work, or what you might call the religion of Yeshua. There are lots of people out there preaching Yeshua, and they've got a religion that is their brain cells content reflected into Yeshua's words, and it becomes their religion about Jesus, and most of it is a total, complete fraud. Not saying there aren't wonderful people engaged doing wonderful things, because there are many, many compassionate, wonderful people within the churches. They have grasped to some degree that piece of the puzzle from Yeshua. But the actual work of forgiveness, unfortunately, by most has been left behind. The thing to do is not have you believe anything, not have you join anything, take the tools, put them to work, and change the content of your mind. Then you will fully understand what Yeshua was talking about. Then you will fully embody as a true human being. And you'll remember that Yeshua said there was, he didn't brag about how he came to bring dogma or doctrine. He had one simple statement about why he came. He said, I come to bring you life more abundantly. What is life? My offering, the best piece of information I've been able to come up with yet, is that life is love flowing through a cell. That's what we're designed for. Yeshua came to show us how to unplug those energetic patterns, forgive those energetic patterns that inhibited the flow of love through our cellular structures. That's all. The whole dogma and doctrine thing is all made up by men to control other men, or to gain property or power. You look at the so-called religious wars. There are no religious wars, but people who pretend to have a religion go, oh, your religion is different than mine, and you have property that I want, so I'm going to call you the evil religion. I'm going to come and destroy you, and lo and behold, I get your property. I get power over you. Wow, how cool is this? And the teachings of Yeshua languish. And again, at the same time, acknowledging millions of truly dedicated, wonderful people that are working in the direction within any and every church and within any and virtually every religion, working to bring forward the presence of the love that they are into the world through service and support of their fellow human beings. So our work is that of reestablishing the first century meaning of the Aramaic words of Yeshua, and in particular, presenting the refined tools of how to remove what never belonged as we built the brain cells for the truth of what he said. So our project, if you're new to the show, we've been working with the Gospel of Thomas, which is a series of sayings from Yeshua that purport to be the inner or the secret teachings of Yeshua. There's no narrative as the Gospels of John or Luke or Matthew or Mark. There isn't a story about. It's just the straight-up wisdom sayings of Yeshua. So we've been covering those now for, I'm not even sure, a few weeks. And we're going to continue. And before I step into the next segment of the Gospel of Thomas, Do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up, Jeannie? Anything happening in the chat room? Any questions from the app or any questions in email?
No, I think we've got it all covered, and there's no hands up and no questions in the chat room.
Cool. Well, then we're heading toward, just 1 second here, my page skipped. Saying number 47. So we've covered the first 46 sayings from the Gospel of Thomas, and so we're now on 47. And Yeshua says, "It is not possible for a man to ride 2 horses or draw 2 bows. It is not possible for a servant to serve 2 masters, or he will honor the one and dishonor or insult the other. A man does not drink old wine and immediately desire to drink new wine. If you're a connoisseur of wines, you know that an aged wine has a far superior taste to new wine. It takes time for the wine to grow into its fullness." And he says about the wine, he uses that as a metaphor here, "They do not pour new wine into old skins." If they had an old wineskin and they poured new wine into it, what happened is it would ferment and explode. So you didn't do that. So it says, pour new wine into old skins lest they burst, nor do they pour old wine into new skins lest it spoils. They do not sew an old patch on a new garment, or a rent will come. So, in essence, what he's saying here is in our modern, a modern idiom, and I can remember this from when my kids were small and were learning math. And you remember they said, and this would fit right in with this series of statements, you can't do new math with an old math mind. You can't do Yeshua with the mind of man. You just can't do it. You can't figure it out, and you can't do it. That's why there's so much conflict, why those who say they believe and they take on somebody's brain cells about Yeshua, teachings that would return them to functioning as and out of the active presence of love, is lost. Because they're trying to hold on to the old mind, the old way of thinking, the carbon-based memory system, and force these new ideas into it. And it just doesn't work. So in essence, he's saying it takes a total change in your mind in order to comprehend the teachings of Yeshua. You know, if you go back to Adam, Adamos, which the word red clay means is Adamos. This body-mind unit stores everything that happens energetically, as I said earlier, and passes that stored information from generation to generation. And if you were to deliver your body to the chemist lab and say, tell me what this is made of, they would tell you that it's made of, its base element is carbon, and that carbon atom has 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. He's saying you can't bring the mind of what was called, and this isn't a religious idea, it's just that in your real life, in your real world, where you live, move, and have your being, where you work, where you hang out and play, where you spend time with your friends, you're designed to function out of conscious, active, present love. And if stored in your carbon-based memory, carbon 666, remember, you know, there are 2 minds. One we would call the mind of Christ, or the mind of love. And then there's the mind that goes against the mind of love. What was that called? It's called the Antichrist. And the Antichrist had a number. What was its number? 666. Could it be they knew carbon-based memory held every energy from the past, and that when resonated into activity, that information stored in carbon-based memory formulated perception, formulated a picture in the mind that was a reflection of the content of the mind. Most people have no idea that the pictures that show up in their mind, first and foremost, tell them about the content of their own minds. So for the person who says you've got a low body temperature, when I ask you to tell him he's really cool, what's stored in carbon-based memory is cool has to do with hot heat and warm temperature. One would have to have stored in brain cells, in carbon-based memory, the brain cells for the idiom, cool, nice guy, good guy, we like him. All kinds of wonderful things. If that's not stored in carbon-based memory, then that mind, which in Aramaic was called, or pardon me, out of the Aramaic translations, properly translated, was called the mind of man, Adamos, the red clay, perception. There's some interesting Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, we can measure 10,000 units of electrical activity happening in the human form, that the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness in that same time frame is 9 bits, a little tiny, tiny fragment. And most people look at that 9-bit mind. And yesterday, remember, we talked about the broken eye, that to wake up from Adam, you've got to break your eye in that Aramaic idiom, in that Aramaic idiom sense. What did that mean? Literally perception. What resonates in carbon-based memory fires, forms images, and is painted on the inside of your eyeballs. And you think that what you're looking at on the inside of your eyeballs, you're actually looking out through your eyeballs to what's happening in the world, and you're not. And what happens is we substitute what's painted on the inside of our eyeballs for what's actually happening in the world. So there's actuality, which has been estimated in that same time frame where 9 bits of data build the perceptual world. It's been estimated that perhaps in the actuality there are 20 trillion, nobody knows, perhaps 20 trillion bits of data. So if you're in an actuality of 20 trillion bits and you come up with a 9-bit mind, 9-bit picture, it's ridiculous. You know, if you've ever been in a courtroom, I like to use this example. You go into a courtroom and there were 6 people that testified about an accident, and you wonder if any 2 of them were at the same accident. Their realities are so different. The construct of their minds were so different. You know, the fellow who was prejudiced against women drivers swore that he saw the woman drive through the red light, when the fact is it was the guy that drove through the red light. But his construct with his bias about women says it was her fault. So we've got this red clay storage system, generation upon generation upon generation upon generation of data. And every error in the data is in carbon-based memory. And then we have what they call the opposite mind, the mind we're designed to live in, the mind of Christ. Remember one of the early sayings from this book of Thomas was, go ask a newborn. Go spend time with a newborn to get what life is. What Yeshua was talking about when he said, I come to bring you life more abundantly. We just had the privilege of spending a week with our new grandson, who is just going into his 7th week. Oh, just awesome. So we have the mind of the Creator available. We all come in connected to it. Where Yeshua said, woe to you who defiles one of these little ones. Woe to you who puts hostility and fear into one of these little ones' minds. Better than a millstone should be put around your neck than you destroy one of these. So we have the mind of the red clay, the mind of man the Scriptures refers to, and then there's the mind of Christ. Again, nothing religious about it, just that we're designed to live in a mind that is fully connected to love. So when that statement is made of you can't serve God and mammon, you can't listen to a mind connected to love and listen to the fake hostility-based voice of carbon-based memory. Remember when that came up in a conversation with Yeshua, and there's a guy who picks up on Yeshua's work. He says, hey, this is cool. I'm going to do this. He says, but first I have to go bury my mother and my father. Now, that didn't mean his mother and father had just died and he had to go dig a hole and bury them. It was a tradition in that culture that being the oldest son, he had to take care of his parents until they died and buried them. So he was saying, well, Yeshua, yeah, I want to follow you, but I might be 20 years before I come back to do it. And Yeshua says, let the dead bury the dead. He wasn't insulting the parents. He was saying that the parents, the culture is not alive in Christ, is not alive in the mind of love, and therefore are dead. So he said to the guy, let the dead bury the dead. Come and do what you said you're going to do. Because the mind of the dead, the mind of hostility, fear, the mind that comes from the one world universal religion of blame has no possible function in the face of the mind of Christ. Hostility and fear must be dissolved. There has to be a total change. He says, in order for you to live, you must die. What's he saying? There is a self stored in this cellular structure, in carbon-based memory, that's made up of all kinds of false ideas, and in particular, the power person dynamic of your family system. You have a power person that runs your life when the stress is up and the chips are down, and notice that you do things that you hate when you do that. And that false self is cast in concrete. And that false self, the basic principle of this particular saying of Yeshua is that that false self is utterly incapable of comprehension of truth. Now, we think we can reform it and get it to work. No, there is no place for it. You can't ride two horses. You can't pull two bulls. You can't put, or you don't put old wine in new skins. You don't put an old patch on a new piece of cloth. He's saying it isn't going to work. The mind of man was meant to be the footstool of the mind of Christ in him. Carbon-based memory was meant to be your footstool. You remember Christ restored Satan to the footstool. What is Satan? Satan in Aramaic is the resistor, one who misleads. What is it that misleads us? The mind of hostility and fear. And with its errant beliefs, there is no room. Cannot resolve carbon-based memory, the mind of man and the mind of Christ. All you can do is do the work required. And you remember Yeshua, there's a group of disciples that come to him. They're like, what do we have to do? What's this all about? And he tells them. He uses an Aramaic idiom, which I'm not going to go into right now. But he tells them. And half of the disciples, who supposedly were dedicated to his work, grumbled as they were leaving. Their grumbling was, who can hear this? Too hard a saying. Who can hear that I have to forgive everything in me that's based in hostility, fear, dishonesty, terror, trauma, hatred, vengeance? Who can hear such a thing? And they left and they never came back. Too hard a saying. If you are fully engaged in your ego self, ego, edging God out, edging love out, if you're engaged in that carbon-based memory self, yes, it is going to be a major piece of work to undo that mind. But you can't ride that mind and stay connected to the mind of love. You can subdue that mind, make it your footstool, remove everything based in hostility or fear from it so that it is now an instrument for you to use. So in this series of metaphors that he gives, the wine, the two bows, the two horses, the old master, or the master, and the new master trying to serve two. One represents growth into love, and the other, the mind of Adamos, the red clay, carbon-based memory, deterioration and death. Because this core teaching has been so untried, virtually everybody says, oh, well, yeah, but the logical conclusion of actually living in the mind of Christ is a fantasy. If you listen to Yeshua, read him in Revelations, and what he's talking about is the mind of Christ in you, the mind of being in you, the mind connected to love, which you were born with, and by the age of 4 was probably destroyed by your culture, at least in activity. The mind you were born with has to become fully expressed. You will grow into that. And the mind of hostility or fear, when you turn your head with that, just the tone of voice, or the words, or the look, or the breath that's based in hostility or fear, every time you do that, it is a disease moving in you and is a reflection of a power person dynamic. You can't put being into that and have it survive. You don't put new wine into old wineskins. You don't put an old patch on new cloth. The one master that Yeshua was talking about serving represents the growth into living out of the original mind you were born with, the mind of Christ, the mind of love. And the other, literally, leads to death. Overcoming that other leads to eternal life. And of course, because nobody's done it, everybody says, oh yeah, well that's silly, you have to die, that's just the way it is. Well, you know, you may be right, but the way I heard the guy say it, if you listen to him in Revelations, he says, to he that overcomes, and what does he got to overcome? The mind of hostility or fear in you. Everything on the right side of the equation has to be forgiven. To he that overcomes, she will not taste of the second death. What's the first death? When being gets lost in carbon-based memory and thinks they are the picture in their mind, thinks they are that false self. To he that overcomes, he or she will not taste of the second death, but will become a pillar in the temple of my God, and shall go out no more. What's a pillar? It's a fixture. What's the temple? It's not a purple curtain in a church. When they talked about the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, that's not the temple that we're talking about. This is the temple. The barrier, the veil, is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. That has to be open, and the generational patterns have to be worked through. That's the growth. That's the strength builder as you do that work. So, if you remove everything that is off the mark in your system, your energy system is eternal. Now, if your mind holds lies about energy, then you can believe that, well, death is inevitable, aging is inevitable, and, you know, maybe it is. But here's my offering. If it isn't, then it'll kill you to not believe that you can be eternal. And if it is true, then you've got a shot at actually pulling it off. And or, even if you don't pull it off, that you set the stage for those that come after you to pull it off, to actually bring it about. So you live either in the mind energy of fear and hostility, the old wineskins, or the mind energy of love. He says, I come to bring you life, and bring it more abundantly. And you can't ride both of those horses. You can't allow hostility and fear to source your creative process and expect to have wonderful results in your life. The tools you use to produce a result will always produce a result, just like the tools. One minister of war in America back a few decades ago wrote a book called Fight for Peace. What a sad statement, Mr. Weinberger. And you listen to people today, and they're talking about how they're going to fight for justice. Well, if you fight for justice, then what you'll get is fight. You won't get justice. You want to step into loving for justice, for standing as a space of love and bringing justice into your own mind and healing, then you grow into that state of being. Otherwise, you will insult the mind of Christ. So this is a pretty potent and powerful statement that Yeshua makes in this particular passage. Ties right into 46, one of the ones we did yesterday, where it talks about John the Baptist was the highest man born of woman. In other words, of the body, of carbon-based memory. John the Baptist was the pinnacle. But what was he in the new level? He was nothing. He was the very lowest were higher than John the Baptist, because John the Baptist was still, even though he had his intellect together and he had it kind of in order, he was still functioning out of carbon-based memory. And he was trying to fix it with water. Here, let me pour water on you. That'll fix it. And he remained the lowest in what was called the kingdom, in the community of love. He remained the lowest. Why? Because he did not know how to break his eyes. That's a statement from yesterday. Read it again, number 46. From Adam to John the Baptist, there is none born of woman who is higher than John the Baptist, so that his eyes would not be broken. In other words, he was going to stick to perception. He was going to stick to pictures in his mind. Even though he got the idea of love, he still didn't know how to crack, how to collapse those perceptual constructs. You do know how to do it. That's what forgiveness is. Yeshua brought that technology. He had not presented at that point to John the Baptist. And then he says in this statement 46, and he shall be among you as a little one, shall know the kingdom, and shall be higher than John. This isn't mysticism. This isn't theology. He's talking about how we function as human beings. Each one of us comes in a higher state than John the Baptist, and we live in a culture that specializes in destroying that, in knocking it out of us with its unresolved hostility and fear-based patterns. So carbon-based memory, the mind of man, is represented by John and his intellectual intelligence. He's at the pinnacle of what the perceptual mind is capable of, and the perceptual mind is capable of nothing. Nothing when it comes to functioning as a human being. Remove its issues, and it becomes your footstool. It's restored to where it was designed to be in the first place. So it takes facing all hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, drama, and trauma, and forgiving those dynamics from within your own carbon-based memory. And there is only one way that I know of to consistently, persistently do that, and that is the first century Aramaic forgiveness process of Yeshua. And if you haven't used that, if you're not familiar with that, go to our website, whyagain.org. On the right-hand side, you'll see the social media links. Click on our YouTube channel and go to the Why Is This Happening to Me Again? The latest version of Why Is This Happening to Me Again is there, available free. Up until just a couple of years ago, that was a paid product that we had in our catalog, and we still have it in the catalog. If you want to support us, buy it. Yes, if this is benefiting you, please, do something to support us. Help us to carry this to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. Watch the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. Start to build the brain cells for what forgiveness means, and then commit yourself to staying with it for at least the next 10 years. Because it will take time for the mind of man in you, carbon-based memory, to begin to comprehend. I've shortened the time, I hope, that it will take you to make that transition. I know that from the first time I engaged in the first century Aramaic forgiveness process and began to understand it to the point where I could explain why and how it worked. Took me 35 years working full-time with it. And I'm talking about, I taught that Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, sometimes as many as 3 times in a day. And though I taught it, I still didn't know why and how it worked. Well, watch that workshop and you'll now know exactly how it works. So you don't have to spend 35 years doing it. But it will take time to rebuild your carbon-based memory so that it can reflect the mind of Christ in you accurately and truly. That's the process we're inviting to engage in. So again, the mind of what was called the mind of Christ represents growth into the presence of love, functioning as the presence of love. The other represents deterioration and death. You either go with the mind energy of fear or hostility, or you go with the mind energy of love. And every time you think of that, remember Yeshua said, I come to bring you life. I come to enhance the ability of love to flow through your cells, your state of being, to be incarnated, literally flowing in this cellular structure of your so-called body. So that's statement 47. And Miss Jeannie, we've got about 10 minutes left before I move on to 48. Let's open the gate and see if anybody has a comment, question, thought, answer. Do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? Or anybody in the chat room with a question or comment for us? If you're listening to us on one of those stations where we can't see you in our control panel, if you have a question, you can call into the show directly. The call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel, and Jeannie will know you want to speak with us. So, Ms. Jeannie, do we have anybody out there with a hand up?
Well, Roan's hand's up, but I believe it's left over from Dr. Tim, but we'll check.
Sure,
903. 903, do you have a comment, or was your hand just still from Dr. Tim?
It was up from Dr. Tim.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Roan. How you be, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, Doctor?
I'm rocking. Doing well. Been out this morning playing in the garden.
All right, that'll work. It's always a good opportunity to, be outside and do something productive. My hand was up from Dr. Tim's session, but I did have something on my mind. I just didn't find it to correlate all that well with where you were and what you're saying. But I'll go ahead and throw it out there. Sure. So I was thinking about, or I've been thinking about mental health and aspects of mental disabilities and whatnot, and something such as, we'll say, autism or Asperger's, something along those lines. What would you say that someone's approach would be with this method? Would it be the same as anyone else, or is there a different way of going about it? I guess there's a number of ways that I was thinking about it, like genetics, what we get passed on, unresolved things. Just kind of off the top, what's your thought in regards to that?
Well, my offering would be that, of course, one is not going to be able to engage in the intellectual process of forgiveness until the intellect is developed to a level where they're capable of comprehending it. And so there's a great principle in the Course in Miracles that says when you're healed, you are never healed alone. And so if the caretaker of one who does not have the mental capacity to engage in forgiveness is doing their healing work, they will tend to open the space for the advancement of the child under their control, or the disabled person under their control. So that would be one approach, and then to begin to instruct in how the forgiveness process operates. Our granddaughter is 6 now, and we've started, from the very beginning. One of the things that Jeannie and I would do all the time with her when she was in our care is I would look at Jeannie, or Jeannie will look at me, and I'd say, And Aria, our granddaughter, calls her Nini, and I would say, Nini, why are we here? And Nini would say, to be loved. And then she'd turn to me and say, Papa, why are we here? And I'd say, to be loved. And that would be our conversation with Aria. So that was a starting point before she had the intellectual capacity to even know whether she could have had any cognitive difficulties or not, which, thank God, she doesn't. And from there, it has grown to the point where she knows how to cancel goals. It was fun back when we really started moving into this conversation with her at a new level is, maybe a year and a half ago or so, maybe not quite that long, when she was in school. You know, she did pre-kindergarten, then kindergarten, she's now grade 1. And as we taught her to cancel goals and what that meant, she came home from school one day and said, I'm trying to teach this to my friends, but they won't do it, so I just canceled the goal for them. And not long ago, she asked Jeannie the question. She said, you know what, there's something going on, and you know, I worked on this last week, and I canceled this goal, and it's happening again. You know, Nini, should I cancel the goal again, or did canceling it last week, was that enough? And so, you know, she's developing the brain cells and understanding how that goes. We just did a week's vacation with her and her little brother last week, and when we were heading back, like, you know, she had her parents to herself with her brother on vacation for a week. No work, you know, they're together full time, and then the other set of grandparents, you know, Ryan, our son's wife's parents, and we went down to the beach with them, and we had a week. So she had all of us for 2 weeks or a week, and then, you know, her parents. And so in coming back, she did not want to come back. She's like, meltdown over, no, I want to stay and do this. It's like, well, remember, Aria, now you know how to cancel a goal, and the only reason that you're in this emotions moving in you is you have a goal to stay on vacation with everybody with you. If that weren't in your mind, this meltdown wouldn't be happening. So this is the opportunity to heal that part of you that's melting down, that's holding this sadness and this, you know, meltdown that you have. And so it takes time to build the brain cells. And so whatever level somebody's at cognitively, then you would speak with them at the level they are in order to help them to build the brain cells to move to higher and higher levels of understanding. Does that fit? Does that make sense for your question?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think there's more to it than, or I guess more specifics that I didn't really touch on, but I know we don't have much time, so perhaps on another show I'll reintroduce my question. But I appreciate that, and it actually does help.
We got 5 minutes.
Okay, and Ron?
Well, three maybe.
Another thing is if you go to the website and you go to where the forgiveness worksheets are, so click Start Here and then go to Reality Management, there's some children's worksheets, and it goes through the forgiveness tool, but it's, you know, kindergarten, you know, pre-reading even, you know, drawing pictures instead of putting it into words, so that might help too. I've used the children's worksheet with adults a lot of times.
Okay. Well,
we also have a book that Julie Haverstick, a kindergarten grade 1 teacher, wrote called Healing Children, Loving Children, where she took all of these tools. She was an inner city school teacher in Dayton, Ohio, and she took all of these tools and put them into a language appropriate level for kindergartners, and she created 7 levels of worksheets, the first one being for someone who's, you know, very young and has little language comprehension, and then she goes through a progression, worksheet 1, worksheet 2, 3, 4, up to 7, where now you can move into the adult version of the forgiveness process. So that's all laid out in her book, Healing Children, Loving Children, and that's in our catalog on our website. And
okay, and I haven't been on the site all month. In a little while, so I'll I'll do that. When I get a chance, I'll head on over there and kind of peruse through all the links that you all mentioned and kind of see what goodies are over there. So thank you all for that, and you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will go ahead and jump off.
Cool. It's in the plan. Also, in the app, if you've got the Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness app, which you can download on either an Android or an iPhone, there is a children's game called the Dragon Klingon game for introducing kids to the forgiveness process. And in it, there's the roaring of the dragon when they score points and that sort of thing. So we've gotten good reports from people using that with kids. So awesome. Okay. Well, thanks for those thoughts and questions, and have a blessed day.
Thank you all. You do the same.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate and delight in sharing this time with you. We invite you to pass the tools on. If there's somebody in your world that's got pain and trauma going on, send them a link to the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. Sit down and show them how to do even the simplest worksheet. The core tools are right in that first worksheet that a kindergartner can do. And you'll be amazed at how people shift and the changes that will occur. And then if you do that, as you develop questions, we're here to answer those questions 5 days a week. So please pass it along. And if you're benefiting, we invite you, you'll notice we don't have any advertisers on the show. We pay to do this show. We don't get paid. And we're doing it because we're here to committed to making these tools available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And if you are in a position to assist in that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's financial or taking on some of the projects that we have to do with technology and Heartland and all sorts of things, then let us know that you're available and that you'd like to do something. And if you go to our website, again, whyagain.org, at the bottom of the page, there's a donate button. Push the button. Do a donation. Thanks for your support, and have the best year yet of your choice.